Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Mavic Cabrera Baleza, the founder and chief executive officer of the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders and a board member of the Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. I will be your moderator at this panel discussion entitled Understanding the Triple Nexus Through a Gender Lens. What do women-led responses to COVID-19 teach us about the practice of linking peace and humanitarian work? This panel discussion is one of the registered events at the Generation Equality Forum in Paris. On behalf of the co-organizers, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, the Austrian Development Cooperation, CARE Austria, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, welcome and thank you for joining us. The main subject of our conversation is Triple Nexus, which is an approach that aspires to transform the way that humanitarian, development, and peace initiatives are planned, implemented, and financed in fragile and conflict-affected situations to more effectively and coherently meet human needs, mitigate vulnerability, promote peace, and build resilience. During the next 45 minutes, we will be examining the links between development, peace building, and humanitarian action through a gender and intersectional lens. Building on the experiences and expertise of local women peace builders in Kenya and Palestine, our formidable panelists will discuss concrete actions and financing needed to ensure that the triple nexus moves from words to action and that gender equality is intentionally integrated, especially in the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. And now, to open our panel, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Jorge Moreira de Silva, Director of the OECD Development Cooperation Directorate. Mr. de Silva, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mavic, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to participate in today's discussion around the importance of gender equality within the humanitarian development peace nexus, development agency, CARE Austria, and the Global Network of Women Peace building this side event possible, as well as the governments of France and UN Women for organizing this remarkable Generation Equality Forum. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the women peace builders with us today. They are they are critical for today's conversation. Today, more relevant than ever before. The COVID crisis has exacerbated existing inequalities, including gender inequalities, that layer on top of existing conflict and fragility. This exacerbates conflict. Our research at OECD shows that gender inequalities and fragility are inextricably linked, and that is one of the drivers of the root causes of fragility. Narrowing the gender gap can reduce fragilities and lead to more prosperous and peaceful societies. As countries respond to the COVID-19 crisis, we have seen the need to better connect actions across humanitarian, development, peace nexus in order to address these issues. As you recall, in 2019, the OECD Development Assistance Committee, the DAC, adopted the recommendation on the humanitarian development peace nexus. The recommendation provides guidance on strengthening across pillars of humanitarian development peace nexus and around gender equality. The recommendation can only be fully implemented with a gender equality perspective in program design, implementation, and bridging gender financing gaps across the nexus. The need to adopt coherent approaches on gender equality across the nexus has increased as a result of the COVID-19 Throughout the ongoing pandemic, the network gender equality that you know very well as the GenderNet, and the International Network on Conflict and Fragility, the INCAF. So these two networks of DAC are serving as platforms for our members to discuss what works and where they can best join forces promoting joint approaches. In order to implement the nexus in fragile contexts, support for gender equality is critical. DAC members have integrating or dedicated to gender equality in fragile contexts has been steadily rising, reaching $20.3 billion on average per year in 2018-2019, which represents 43% of aid in this context. Looking at humanitarian funding in fragile context, around 20% of this aid, which represents $2.6 billion, integrated gender equality objectives. We have seen, however, and this dimension is really important, that these funds are not necessarily flowing to those types of programs most in need. For example, 2018-2019, women's organizations and institutions in fragile contexts received only close to 1% of gender equality focused aid to fragile contexts. However, we have long known the crucial contribution of women's organizations to conflict resolution and peace building, and this support is unmatched with that reality. In the COVID context, women's organizations and fragile contexts are contributing actively to providing support to families and communities affected. Momentum around women, peace and security agenda also provides an important opportunity for operationalizing the nexus. So this is the time for implementation and operationalization. For example, national action plans developed for the implementation of the women, peace and security agenda at country level can promote approaches for increased coherence across the nexus. In this way, we can jointly promote SDG 5 on gender equality and SDG 16 on just, peaceful and inclusive societies. Last year, we commemorated the 20th anniversary of the UN resolution, and in a few days, the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action will be launched, and I'm pleased to announce that the OECD is becoming a Compact signatory and that we will support implementation and monitoring of the Compact through our data and policy dialogues. To conclude, I would like to encourage all of you to capitalize on this momentum to promote the gender aspects of the nexus and to better connect development, humanitarian and peace actors to make the implementation of the nexus a reality. And again, I'd like to thank your kind attention. Thank you, Mavic.
So much, Jorge. And to our audience members, I am not able to present the full background of our formidable speakers, starting with Jorge, but they are available on the platform. Thank you again, Jorge, for emphasizing the centrality of the Women, Peace and Security agenda if we are to effectively implement the triple nexus. Moving on our program, I am now excited to share that we will be having a dialogue with women peace builders, very strong leaders and on their own in their respective countries and region. And without further ado, I would now introduce our first panelist, Ms. Suhair Faraj, Palestinian feminist activist and General Director of Women, Media and Development. Suhair, welcome. I have a question for you to start our conversation. How have women in Palestine responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how have their responses brought together the humanitarian, peace and development aspects?
Hello, everybody. When we converting Corona in Palestine, we are talking about more than one phase of challenges. and especially when we are speaking about peace building and this free, I think is the Israeli occupation and its control over the land, people, border in West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, the siege on Gaza, and not taking the responsibility as occupiers to protect us from Corona. This is one challenge. The lack of Palestinian Authority control over the land, border, main roads, and all kind of resources. Plus, women and girls are completely invisible by the Palestinian government. In addition to all these challenges, the civil society was confused at the beginning of the pandemic and left everything to the Palestinian government control and responsibility, which turn militarized the comforting of the pandemic. In the second week, we are as TAM, especially Women Media and Development, we based in Bethlehem, and the Corona started in Bethlehem, have taken the initiative to participate in confronting this pandemic. We developed an emergency plan consisting of communicating with the donor to change and reallocate budget activity based on the emergency needs. Some of them accept and some of them not. Then we contacted the created emergency committee and demanded that we as women from civil society must be active member of this committee. At the beginning, they ignore us, but we insist on that till we became a member. After our success in Bethlehem to become a member and an active member, it was generalized to the whole West Bank through the Ministry of Women Affairs, and 240 women were included in the emergency committee in all over West Bank, which make the women and girls need to become more considered in the emergency intervention and ensure fair distribution of the resources. We listed also in TAM, we listed our priority in the emergency plan and intervention. We responded to the need of women and girls, and we provided them an example with dignity kit, including very special things for women, special medicine, food, diapers, charging, internet for some girls to continue their education, paying some house wages to some girls living away from their home and family, and they lost their jobs, providing some needs for women and girls living in the shelters, and providing some needs for female civilian prisoners within the Palestinian Authority prison. We also supported the health sector with providing them with needed materials such as sterile clothes and protection form. In addition, we worked also on monitoring the violations, such as the death of a newborn baby because of the closure of the street with stones and not letting anyone to cross the roads, and demanding an investigation committee, which is done, and it was successful. They removed this stone to block the street. We supported a women association in Jordan Valley to return their office back after it was taken by the local council, just because they are a women association. Even they didn't talk with them that it's for emergency, they will take their office. We monitor the internet bullying against women, especially the leaders and the activists in that situation. The third and important issue is raising awareness through social media about domestic and electronic violence during the quarantine period, which is increased a lot. And we supported the women survivor of violence through our Be Safe platform, by phone and in person. In addition, we raised awareness about prevention from coronavirus. But we also take care a lot about the government released and regulation in that period, which is it was considered the stereotype of woman rule. An example, they said women can stay home and not going to work because they have to take care of their children. In some side, it's good that they give them a space, but in other side, they didn't share the responsibility between women and men, and they said you can work half-half, then they can, but they in fact take it as a stereotype. The pandemic period, it's make the situation more difficult for women because it's put a lot of burden on them. It's turned them back to the stereotype roles for caring about their families and their children. They start to do multiple tasks in the same moment, and they also was put in the same house 24 hours with their violent members of the family.
So here, what you're telling us really demonstrate how women peace builders and women peace activists have become first responders and frontliners during the COVID-19 pandemic amidst all of the conflict and other issues that you are dealing with. It is in the DNA of women peace builders and women peace activists to see the different aspects, right, of the needs of women and girls, but also the needs of the frontline health workers. It's comprehensive, it's coherent, and efficient. Thank you so much. I'll come back to you again after we hear from Wevin. Wevin Muganda, our next speaker, is the founder and coordinator of Mutual Aid Kenya, and she's also the Korowai's Peace Building Fellow at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. Wevin, I have a question for you. When you started your organization, Mutual Aid Kenya, to respond to the impact of COVID-19 in local communities, how did this work? How did this build your experiences? How did it build on your experiences and knowledge as a young woman peace builder? Over to you.
And all protocols observed. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My experience working at the intersection of youth peace and security and women peace and security agenda influenced the approach in initiating and coordinating Mutual Aid Kenya, a COVID-19 response initiative where the main strategy was to ensure participation of local communities in making decisions regarding COVID-19 response and recovery plans. We built our network of volunteers through education and action where local youth were involved in the distribution of COVID-19 relief packs and also in sensitizing communities on COVID-19 measures. Most importantly, we used our local network to collect the opinions of our communities through a door-to-door campaign in different slums in Mombasa and Nairobi on what they would like the national government to do to better respond to the pandemic. These recommendations contributed to the memorandum that Mutual Aid submitted to the Senate Committee for consideration in the formulation of the Pandemic Response and Management Bill. Participation in decision-making is critical and should be prioritized. Even during a crisis, we must find a way to include local communities, especially young people and women. Our outreaches also included sensitization for girls and women on how they can access health services after curfew hours, since there were no transport services working at that time. Additionally, our advocacy was focused on strengthening community care, and reiterating that in times of crisis, communities are all we have, particularly in promoting the rights and inclusion of the most vulnerable groups, such as girls and women, persons with disabilities, and young people. And so just linking these two agendas to humanitarian action before the pandemic was not very clear, but when the pandemic hit, the lessons from my peace building work became very important in terms of how Mutual Aid Kenya was run and how it worked closely with the community and linking them to other stakeholders such as the Senate and the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wevin, for emphasizing how your peace building experience and your responsibility as you felt it at in the beginning of this pandemic are inextricably linked. And thank you also for emphasizing the importance, in fact, it's a fundamental importance of local women and young women's participation in decision making in conflict resolution, in peace building, and also in humanitarian response. I would like to invite our audience members to use the chat to share your comments and raise your questions. We will make sure to find time to respond to them later. Suhair, I will come back to you now. What do you think the international community can learn from these local stakeholders in strengthening the linkages between humanitarian action, development, and peace work? Both you and Wevin spoke to the inextricable linkages of all those three components. And specifically, how can international actors better support the work and innovation that you are doing at the local level? Over to you.
I think we can't, in the emergency situation, just think about our traditional program and development plan that we always do. In the emergency, we need the basic needs. That's why actors must have contingency plan ready. Civil society and women's institutions are an essential part of it. Women must be in leadership positions and in any committee that are formed. Despite the additional burdens that are placed on their shoulders, actors need to ensure that decisions are taken by including women's expertise and that measures need to respond to special needs of women and girls, and all the additional tasks that women do in crisis, such as unpaid care work, that it became, as we said, double work. We became a digitalization world in many spheres of life, including education, and some cannot access this opportunity. International committee has to ensure that no one is left behind because girls lost access to education in this situation, and they have to make them access again by providing all requirements for e-learning free of charge from government. It's a government's rule, whether tools or the internet, and build the capacity of teachers with specialized strength skills, and they must find way to prevent internet bullying also. Palestinian institution, we have, in general, we have been creative initiatives in this pandemic, trying that no one is left behind. We have been collected unused devices and materials from people or institutions and distribute them to those who do not have. We also modified ourselves with a new situation. We start to provide the psychological services to women, survivor of violence, virtually, by phone and in person for those who can. We also formed local psychological support in villages, in camps, in each area, to give the aid. We also didn't forget the health staff and humanitarian aid groups, and we take care of their mental health. We gave them stress management, self-care strategies, how to deal with their security also. In case of emergency and natural disaster, we must pay attention to document all violations that people in general and especially women are subjected to and report on it. Donors need to be flexible in time of a crisis. They need to enable local actors to quickly adapt to the current needs and to support new and innovative pathways where required. Not thinking only in silos of sectors, but act where it is needed. As we did in TAM, when readjusted our program to the actual need of people. Also, donor should help institutions to be responsive and ensure that they can better prepare for respond to crisis in a way that is responsive to people's needs, especially the marginalized group. Otherwise, these institutions will be isolated and lose their community trust forever. And we are here to respond to the need of the people. And if we can't be adapted quickly to the new need of the people without losing our main goal, no need for our access. An example, we speak about, we are a human rights organization. We are not a humanitarian organization. That's right. But the basic human rights is to give the basic needs, to protect people, to give them the food, to give them a space to be secure. And then we start to think about the next step, development and the violation and documentation of this violation.
Thank you so much, Suhair, for that very eloquent presentation of the context on the ground that also demonstrates how your agility and flexibility while staying true to the vision of human rights as, you know, as something universal in all contexts, in emergency, in conflict. And what you're also explaining to us emphasizes that human rights organizations, women peace builders, women peace activists are humanitarian workers by nature because they respond to the emergencies. And it's unfortunate that we still see many actors in the international community, including especially donors, that do not recognize that role, their role as a humanitarian actor, and that humanitarian actors are only the big organizations that have been around for 50 years or more and operating internationally with sending expats to emergency situations. We need to emphasize that that's not true anymore. Women peace builders, human rights defenders are also humanitarian actors. Thank you so much. Now I am coming back to you, Wevin. As someone involved in the advocacy around the Generation Equality Forum, particularly as you know, an active member of or participant in the compact, through your work with the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, what role do you think does the compact and the Generation Equality Forum in general can play in advancing the triple nexus and in supporting women and youth peace builders more strongly?
Thank you so much, Mavic. The Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action is a platform to build solidarity and organize collective actions on emerging global challenges that will hinder the full implementation of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agenda. Top of my head, I can think of two. These are vaccine inequalities and the increasing digital divide. Um, we must remember that even in COVID-19 recovery plans, the pillars of Resolution 1325 and 2250 must be considered. For example, the participation of local communities in the vaccine rollout plans. This is why my colleagues from Mutual Aid Kenya, led by Sheikh Omar, have since been running the People's Vaccine Kenya campaign, which advocates for the provision of a safe, free, and accessible vaccine rollout. Additionally, they encourage the awareness on the vaccine in the local context using local languages and collect the perspectives of local communities on the vaccine with the aim of ensuring that the vaccine process is driven and owned by local communities. However, even in such a case, we must remember that as other countries are thinking of recovery, others like my own in Kenya, they're still struggling to respond to the crisis. Therefore, the compact must take this up. With participation of decision-making processes and programming being conducted virtually, such as the Generation Equality Forum, many local youth and women continue to be excluded, further marginalizing them and hindering progress in the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas. So as a multi-stakeholder entity, the compact must prioritize digital access and security in its mandate to hold UN entities and member states accountable to their commitments. The compact should increase awareness on the Generation Equality Forum. It's a unique space, it's an important space, as well as the compact on women, peace and security and humanitarian action, particularly on how local peace builders can engage. The compact provides a unique opportunity for accountability, but this is only possible if the local peace builders know how to engage and who to engage with. Thank you.
Thanks, Revin, for emphasizing the role of the Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action, especially on accountability, holding the different stakeholders, member states, the UN, regional organizations, foundations, private sector, and ourselves as civil society actors. And that there are already many commitments. There's no shortage in terms of policies. The shortage is in the implementation. That's why we need accountability mechanism, and the Compact is in a good position to do that. I am now opening the floor for our audience members to raise their questions to our formidable panel. Yeah, I would need assistance of the technical team to share with us if there are no questions from the audience members yet. I would, yeah, we have Jorge with us, Jorge or Mr. Da Silva. The OECD has come up with recommendations on the triple nexus, including financing. Could you elaborate on that and highlight the important points that the international community should be aware of following the recommendations from the research or the paper that you have produced? Mr. Da Silva? All right. I will go back to Suhair first. Suhair, you mentioned that there is a need for more resources in order for you to sustain your work during the pandemic, but also in the recovery. What can you share with us, your experiences in terms of fundraising to support your work? How difficult or easy is that? And if you have recommendations to the donor community in order to continuously support your work, because we all need sustainability, what will those be?
In fact, it was not easy to collect quick funds for the emergency, but some of the donors, as I said, they replied to us very quickly, and they accept we modified our activity, or some other, they ask us to submit a quick proposal or idea what we can do and what's needed, such as maybe, and they were very helpful for us to reply to the need of the people. If we do not have this opportunity, such as CARE, such as Global Fund for Women, Oxfam, they very, very quickly apply to our need. But other donors, without any name, they stuck to the schedule, they stuck to the plan. Even we can't implement the activity because we can't do any activity, an example, face-to-face. There is no gathering, there is no training can be done, and it's a time to replan ourselves and the people to be able to have online training, an example. And all this didn't take in consideration in one hand. In another hand, the budget, it needs to be spent. The project, it needs to be done and achieved on time. Some of the donors, even they didn't give us to modify the plan and to have an extra month to complete our work, which is made for us, for the organization, very, very difficult and heavy. And especially when we are speaking about crisis, people are speaking about their life, their health, their security, and we are talking about them. We need to implement one workshop here or other workshop there. It's not even accepted. We ourselves think it's very heavy on us. We have to think first about people's life, think first about people's need, and we have to, when we are speaking about development, when we are speaking about security, when we are speaking about human rights, we have to give a space to the organization, which is sometimes it's very good to be as core fund. The women organization and human rights organization in general now, they do not have a core fund, which is would make us stuck in a project, and we can't implement our main goal, main space to respond to the emergency need and the crisis. And I think it has to be taken in consideration from the international committee and in the actors in this field.
Thank you so much, Wevin, for emphasizing that a lot of times there's a lack of flexibility with some donors, or should I say many donors, and not recognizing the immediate needs, the urgent needs of women peace builders, human rights defenders who are also experiencing humanitarian emergencies, and they seem to be stuck with their own procedures. Wevin, I'm coming back to you now. I would like to ask, you have a national action plan on women, peace, and security in Kenya, and in fact, it's now on its second phase, if I'm not mistaken. How do you see the national action plan of Kenya becoming an instrument in promoting the triple nexus strategy?
Thank you so much. Actually, we just came from the first monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of the NAP in its first year. And what came out strongly is the need to adjust and be adaptable to the COVID-19 situation, because the NAP was developed before the pandemic. And so the NAP provides a unique opportunity, because not only does it focus on peace and security, but the pillar on relief and recovery links peace work to humanitarian work, and overall mainstreaming to the government processes and development processes through the support of the State Department, then it is the opportunity to advance the triple nexus agenda.
Thank you so much. I think we have a couple of minutes. I really would like to hear from OECD, and I know Jorge has to leave for a meeting, but we have Lisa Williams from the gender section of OECD. Lisa, can you hear me? I have a question for you, if you can hear me. Okay, they are disconnected. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so I like to call on another good friend who is a major supporter and a global leader on women, peace, and security, as well as on promoting gender responsive humanitarian action, to share with us the closing remarks. And I have the pleasure of introducing Desiree Schweitzer, who is the Director General for Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Assistance at the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. Desiree, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mavik. It's so good to see you again. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor of closing this discussion. Let me start by thanking the panelists for the valuable contributions. I think it was particularly important to hear about the on-the-ground experience in Kenya and Palestine. Today's discussion illustrates once more that despite the progress we have achieved with the women, peace and security agenda, in many cases, realities for women and girls in countries affected by conflict and humanitarian crisis have hardly changed. What the last 20 years have shown is that the women, peace and security agenda still requires a robust push for implementation. The pandemic is yet another strong reminder to push forward the women, peace and security agenda as COVID-19 continues to affect lives and livelihoods around the world, and made it all the more evident that women are disproportionately affected. We've seen a significant increase in gender-based violence worldwide, as was mentioned before. We've also seen that women are disproportionately represented in sectors negatively affected by crisis. Women are more likely to be first responders, service providers, and health workers than men. However, despite critical contributions, women remain sidelined in crucial decision-making processes. The international community, donors and politicians need to take into account perspectives of female leaders on the ground, strengthen their voices, and support their priorities when it comes to decisions affecting their lives. As DCD Director Maria de Silva so importantly pointed out, OECD research has shown that gender inequalities are not standalone issues, but drive conflict and fragility. Narrowing the gender gap can therefore contribute to a more peaceful and prosperous world. Few points on my country's engagement. Austria is committed to the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We're therefore actively supporting the cooperation between the OECD, DAC GenderNet, and the INCAF, the International Network for Conflict and Fragility. We consider it crucial to add a gender lens to the implementation of the DAC recommendation on the humanitarian development peace, the so-called triple nexus. And we welcome this recommendation because it provides a framework to bring development, peace building, and humanitarian access together. In our current engagement in Palestine, for example, we actively support this process of coordination among all relevant actors with the goal to integrate women's and gender perspectives more systematically. We welcome the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact because it will contribute to an increased cooperation and accountability of different actors and significantly reduce the gap between the aspirations and concrete actions. By supporting women's rights organizations such as the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, Austria contributes to localize the provisions of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and we will continue our support to grassroots and women-led organizations to see this milestone Security Council resolution and the follow-up resolutions fully implemented. It is good to know that many other member states, the UN, and other key actors remain committed to this common agenda. And let me end by quoting one of the women peace builders who was part of the Global Women's Forum on Peace and Humanitarian Action in Vienna last year, who organized by the Austrian Development Corporation, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, and Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. She said, it is the local women who breathe life into Resolution 1325. They are the power of 1325. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Desiree. And on that note, I thank all of our audience members and our formidable panelists and Desiree, of course, for joining us this morning. And thank you to the government of France for hosting the Generation Equality Forum now and the government of Mexico previously. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.